Well, how will the work of lawyers change as AI takes hold? To talk about that, I'm joined by Marlon Hylton. He's a lawyer as well as CEO of Innov-8. Marlon, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate being here. Thank you.
Well, let's talk about your background first, because you are a lawyer, right? Traditional lawyer originally, and now you're doing a different kind of work. So tell us a little bit about how you started and how you got here.
Career-wise, I started as a teacher
Oh,
in Jamaica, where I grew up. Went to teachers college, studied English language, English literature, and history, kind of a far cry from what I'm doing today. Still find it useful, but we can talk about that in another episode. Um, but I always knew, God bless the teachers, but I always knew teaching wasn't the destination for me. So off I came to Canada to an undergraduate program at York University. Towards the end of that, I decided to apply to law school. It is what I'd always wanted to do. So applied, got into Osgoode Hall, studied law, and graduated in 2009. You're an economist. I used to watch you on BNN
it goes back a while.
around
Yeah,
that time. So you know what was happening at that time.
nothing good.
Um, we
Yeah.
were, we were in the middle of a financial crisis. And there I was, pretty much still fresh off the boat from Jamaica, with my Jamaican accent and seeking to enter one of Canada's most traditional professions. And seeking to enter that profession with the goal I bring to most things I do in life, and that is to participate in that profession at sort of the highest standard that I possibly can, and achieving as much success doing it as I possibly can. Now, at that time, in the middle of a financial crisis, it became apparent to me that traditional practice at the level I decided I must participate may not be immediately on the cards. So look for opportunities. And one of those opportunities was e-discovery. At the time, still relatively new. Not many lawyers were, certainly not in Canada, were focused on that space. But during articling, which is kind of the apprenticeship that lawyers go through before being called to the bar, I had the opportunity to work with the legal team at Hydro One, and in that time recognized that there might be something here. And if I'm not going to be, a star litigator at the top of the game, I'm going to do something closely adjacent at the top of the game. E-discovery became that thing. I joined McCarthy Tetro in 2012, if I'm recalling correctly. And I don't believe there could have been a better place to start and lay the foundations for what ultimately happened in my career as it relates to electronic evidence and litigation.
Well, let's go back and define what e-discovery is and how it
Mhm.
is different from what was done prior to that.
So prior to that, potential evidence for a lawsuit or a regulatory matter existed all in paper. We 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 used our typewriters. We sent faxes. We created documents on paper. We communicated on paper. We sent letters. So most of what became evidence was on paper. The digital revolution happened, and suddenly we communicated via email. We drafted using word processing technology. And so evidence was now increasingly electronic. And therefore, the rules that applied to collecting and reviewing and producing and presenting evidence also had to change. to keep up with the advances in technology. And that's how e-discovery was born. Rules around how we identify, preserve, process, review, exchange, and present information in electronic form.
You're talking about the last decade and a half since this has really been implemented. But even before that, I mean, I was hearing people say, oh, we won't need lawyers anymore. You can just draft your will online and, everything is easy to find. In your opinion, has those things, the ones before e-discovery and the ones after, have they changed the demand or need for lawyers a ton, or is the need still there in an important way?
I think, the work of lawyers has always changed with technology. Law is sometimes described, as I'm sure you've heard, as conservative, slow to change. But legal practice has been transformed a few times by technology, slowly, but it has been transformed by technology. Like you said, if we go back a decade and a half or well past that, legal work was much more physically constrained. Research meant going to the firm's library, making your way down to Queen Anne University at Osgoode Hall or law school library. You're looking at banker's boxes. A good lawyer needed legal judgment, but also needed a lot of practical knowledge about where information lived and how to retrieve it. Computers changed all of that, as I just described. And each of the technologies that we just talked about, they changed the tasks that lawyers performed, but none of them eliminated the need for lawyers. What they did was shift the value. Right? So less value was attached to merely finding information or producing a clean, typo-free document, and more value went to framing the issue or interpreting the facts, advising the client, managing the risks, and those sorts of tasks.
With all the technology, we still did not see a real decrease in the need for entry-level lawyers, correct? Even
That's
though,
right.
yeah, it changed. Okay, so let's talk about what comes next, AI. And we've had these technological revolutions already. This is a bigger one. Okay, first, your broad view of this.
So first, we should be clear about what we mean by AI. AI itself isn't new, and it's not new to law.
Okay.
So the term artificial intelligence was coined way back in the early 50s by a group of scholars who decided they were going to meet at Dartmouth and figure out how to teach machines how to do things humans can do. Fast forward that the AI world has gone through different stages of development triggered by the release of different choke points that it experienced along the way. But we got to a form of AI called machine learning. That is where we give enough examples, negative and positive examples, of the output we need to computer systems, and then the computer system is then able to predict what that output should be on its own. That form of AI we've been using in law for a long time. In my world, in e-discovery, we've been using predictive coding. We've been using AI, particularly for document review. So that's not new. And that didn't change the need for junior lawyers. What is new is generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
With some changes in technology, this discovery of what's called a transformer and some other things gave way to what we saw in 2022 with the release of ChatGPT, that first ChatGPT that was publicly available. We saw a computer system that could generate wholly new output without being deliberately trained in the way that we would do for machine learning. So that's really what's different. Generative AI is really what's different here.
And how much do you think that will change things the next, well, short term and medium term?
Mhm. So earlier tools, including machine learning, I believe, mostly changed the mechanics of practice. They helped us store or search or transmit, format, maybe organize, retrieve information as we do in e-discovery. Generative AI can appear to actually perform parts of the work itself. It can draft a memo, summarize a contract, prepare a chronology. It can generate a clause, propose arguments for the litigator. That's really the meaningful shift. And I'll highlight a couple of the key differences with this one for lawyers. The first is fluency. And by that, I mean, generative AI produces very confident language. In law, that matters because confidence is persuasive, right?
Mhm.
A weak answer written poorly is easier to distrust. A weak answer written elegantly can be dangerous. And we see that with lawyers' use of, or even our personal use of these large language models. The second difference is really the scale. Generative AI can generate large volumes of work product very, very quickly. That creates value, yes. But it also means mistakes can be amplified. A poorly supervised junior lawyer may make one mistake. A poorly governed AI workflow can generate hundreds of plausible mistakes at speed, which becomes particularly dangerous for lawyers.
If you're enjoying this conversation and want to bring insights like these to your next event, visit lindanazareth.com to book Linda Nazareth as your keynote speaker. Linda is an economist and futurist, and she is a dynamic and experienced speaker who has presented to audiences across a broad range of industries on the megatrends shaping the economy and the future of work. That's lindanazareth.com, or send an email to speaking@lindanazareth.com.
Yeah, it's an interesting place that we're in, Marlon, because I keep hearing from people, I'm spending more time correcting the AI slop I'm getting than we're actually saving. So in terms of labor needs, we'll talk about if it eventually succeeds, but right now, is it changing the labor needs?
I think the answer is yes, slowly. Changing it, not necessarily in the sense that, and I'm talking about in the legal profession now.
Mhm.
Changing it, not so much yet in the sense that we're hiring less lawyers or lawyers are getting terminated because of AI. Will it get there? Maybe. But I see less of a wholesale, complete reduction in the need for lawyers and more of a shift in what lawyers do. In the same way that we saw a shift in what lawyers did when we drafted using word processing documents instead of the typewriter and needing assistance and everything we needed around those older forms of technology. We're going to see more of a shift in what the junior lawyers are doing.
Okay, so this is the question. If we're going to see a shift in what they're doing, do we need to be hiring different people with different skills? Because I don't know that the LSAT, Law School of Business Test, has changed, right, in decades. Should it change?
I think so. I recently gave a brief address at the Toronto Lawyers Association annual awards gala. And in that address, the whole focus was exactly what you're talking about. In this new age of technology with generative AI doing what it's doing, who do we actually need the lawyer to be and the legal team to be? And I use the idea of the M-shaped professional to explain this point. We know about the T-shaped lawyer, deep in law with some exposure, some expertise in other areas. With what's happening now, I think there's more of a need for legal teams and to a large degree, lawyers themselves to have the deep expertise in law on the one side, deep expertise in technology and AI and project management and the verification that goes into that, the governance that requires. And that is connected by the professional responsibilities of the lawyer, knowing what those are, discharging those, and effective communication between everyone on those teams. And operating in that way will help lawyers to discharge the obligations they have on them when it comes to these new technologies and being able to reap the benefits, the real synergies that can come from human AI integration.
What about the soft skills? I mean, you kind of implied that, but you also talked about the tech part of it. Should we be looking for different soft skills from incoming lawyers?
I think so. With something as new as generative AI, with the seismic kind of shift that it brings to the profession, I believe we will require those soft skills to be able to be that bridge between the technology and, say, the client, and the technology and the law, and being able to in that process.
Interesting. So, if you were advising law firms, how should you develop young talent, hire them, and what should you do? What would the things would be that you tell them?
Mm-hmm. In the age of, so let's assume that generative AI takes hold in the way that we expect it will. Developing new talent becomes a challenge because legal work is really judgment work. Mm-hmm. But it's the grunt work that you do at the beginning of your career that teaches you that judgment. Death by 1,000 cuts. Going through that teaches you what a key document actually looks like. What do good clauses look like? What do bad ones look like? With generative AI, the risk is that all that grunt work for junior associates go away. So then what does training look like? Mm-hmm. And I don't have the answer to that. I don't have the answer to that question. I believe we have to think about it seriously, and we have to think about it quickly, just based on the sheer pace at which AI models are infiltrating the profession. But a good starting point would be to ensure, and this starts, I think, with the law schools, ensuring that young lawyers understand the governance overlay that must exist between all these models and tools and the clients they serve.
Because the knee-jerk reaction is to say, we don't need this work, we can save this money, which doesn't really serve you down the line, right?
That would be very short-sighted.
Yes. Okay, I have a final question. I know you're interested in ethics. We're going to use AI. There's going to be all kinds of things we haven't thought about, the way it's implemented. What are the things that concern you particularly?
Good question. My biggest concern is not that lawyers will use AI, because they will.
Yeah.
And they are. My concern is that they will use it casually in contexts that require professional discipline. Law is a high trust profession. Lawyers deal with people's liberty, property, families, businesses, reputation, privacy, all kinds of really high value rights. So when we introduce a tool that can produce confident, legal sounding work at scale, the ethical question is, is not simply, is the tool impressive? The question is, can it be used consistently with the lawyer's duties as a regulated professional? So a few things worry me a bit. First, competence without understanding. A lawyer may be able to produce a polished memo quickly using AI without actually understanding the underlying law, facts, or the limits of that answer that they just got. Professional competence is not the ability to generate text. It's the ability to know whether that text is right. Is it relevant? Is it complete? Is it even appropriate in the broader real world context to which AI models really, they don't really have a concept of the real world just yet on their own. The second is confidentiality and privilege. Lawyers need to understand what information they're putting into a system. Where does that information go? AI processing may not be happening in Canada, even if all the other parts of a tech that you're using is hosted in Canada. It doesn't necessarily mean when you're doing AI processing that that's actually happening in Canada. Who may access it? Is it retained by the model developer? How do they use it? I wouldn't say that using AI automatically waives privilege. That is much too broad, I think. But careless use of it can create serious confidentiality and privilege risks for lawyers and their clients. And that privilege is the clients, not the lawyers.
A lot to think about, Marlon. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Really appreciate it, Linda. Happy to be here.
Marlon Hylton is CEO of Innov-8. Thanks for listening to Work in the Future. If today's episode sparked ideas for your organization, reach out. I would love to help you shape the future of work at your next event. To discuss your event and book me as a speaker or moderator, please visit lindanazareth.com or email speaking@lindanazareth.com. You can also visit me on Instagram at Linda Nazareth Keynote Speaker and send me a direct message there. If you did like this discussion about the future of work, please remember to subscribe to the podcast. Also, your reviews really help people to find us, so please make sure you take time to leave one wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, thank you to Stokely Audio for audio production.